Andre was 38 years old and made $64,000 a year as a diesel mechanic. His hands, permanently stained with the ghosts of oil and grease, had built a life of quiet stability. They had also built his wife's dream, or rather, his mother-in-law's dream, which his wife Simone had adopted as her own. For 3 straight years, every overtime hour, every skipped vacation, every dollar scraped from his $64,000 salary went into Loretta's Sweet Mornings, a boutique bakery in the heart of Richmond's fashionable Carytown. He'd poured a total of $120,000, his entire inheritance from his mother, into the venture. He was the 60% majority owner on the LLC paperwork, a fact that seemed more like a formality than a reality. The devastating moment came on a Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. He had stopped by the bakery on his way home from the diesel yard on South Side, a rare treat for himself. He wanted one of their $6 brown butter chocolate chip cookies, still warm. He wore his work clothes, a pair of dark blue Dickies coveralls that cost him $49.99 and smelled faintly of engine exhaust. He'd tried to wash his hands with the harsh, orange-scented soap at the shop, but the black grime under his nails was a stubborn tenant. Loretta, his mother-in-law, stood behind the gleaming white quartz countertop, a $7,000 installation he'd paid for. She was arranging a tray of $8 lemon lavender tarts. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her apron was immaculately white. She saw him enter, and her smile, a practiced, customer-facing thing, vanished. It was replaced by a look of profound irritation. "Andre," she said, her voice low and sharp, so the 2 customers browsing the pastry case wouldn't hear. "What are you doing here? Dressed like that?" "Just wanted a cookie, Loretta," he said, trying to keep his voice light. He felt a familiar sense of smallness in this place he owned. The air, thick with the scent of sugar and yeast, felt too clean for him. She glanced at his hands, then at his steel-toed Red Wing boots, the $150 pair he bought once a year. A tiny muscle in her jaw tightened. "Andre, we've talked about this. Customers don't want the smell of grease near their pastries. It's not a good look. People come here for an experience." She gestured around the shop at the pale pink walls, the polished concrete floors, the $3,000 custom light fixtures. "This is a high-end establishment?" He felt the heat rise in his neck. He looked past her, hoping to see Simone emerge from the back kitchen, but there was no sign of her. "I paid for this high-end establishment, Loretta." Her eyes went cold. It happened in an instant. The mask of polite society fell away, and for the first time he saw the unvarnished contempt she held for him. "Your money bought the bricks and the oven. It didn't buy you the right to stink up my shop and drive away my clientele." She took a step forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Get out of my shop, Andre, and don't come back unless you've showered and changed. This is a place of business, not your garage." He stood there for a moment, the cheerful tinkle of the bell on the door from a new customer entering sounding like a scream in his ears. He looked at her face, the carefully applied $60 Chanel foundation, the perfectly drawn eyebrows. He looked at the empire he had funded, the dream he had supported with his sweat and his inheritance, and he realized he was a stranger here. An inconvenient, greasy ATM. He didn't say another word. He turned, the scuff of his work boots loud on the pristine floor, and walked out into the humid Richmond air. He never went back, but what he didn't know was that the betrayal was far deeper and more calculated than a few cruel words. They had no idea what was coming. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to be treated like you don't belong? It's a pain that cuts deeper than any insult. Let us know in the comments if you've ever felt underestimated. And stick with us to see how Andre gets the last word. The facade of their domestic life had been built with the same meticulous care as the bakery. Their two-bedroom condo on Oakmont Drive, with its $2,800 monthly mortgage payment, was a testament to Simone's taste and Andre's labor. She had picked out the $3,500 gray sectional sofa from Crate and Barrel, the $1,200 West Elm coffee table, and the abstract art prints that cost $400 each. He had assembled all of it, his large, calloused hands carefully following the cryptic diagrams, making sure every screw was perfectly tight. Their life operated on a simple financial principle. His salary covered their life, and her future profits covered her dreams. When the bakery was just a concept scribbled in a $40 moleskin notebook, the dream had felt like a shared one. They would sit at their $800 dining table after Andre got home from a 10-hour shift. He'd be eating a simple dinner of chicken and rice he'd made, while she would show him pictures on her $1,100 MacBook Air. "Look at this flooring, baby," Simone would say, her deep brown skin luminous under the warm light of the pendant lamp. "Polished concrete, it's so chic. It's only $12 a square foot." He'd nod, trying to do the math in his head. The space they were looking at in Carytown was 1,500 square feet. That was $18,000 just for the floor. "Looks nice, honey. And the oven. Mama says we have to get a Blodgett. It's the best. The convection system ensures an even bake every single time." The price tag for the commercial convection oven was $18,000, another check from his inheritance account. He had inherited $150,000 when his mother passed, and he'd earmarked it for a down payment on a small house with a yard. But Simone's dream was so vibrant, so detailed. He wanted to give her that. He remembered the day he wrote the first big check. It was for $60,000, half of the initial startup capital. He signed it at their dining table. His pen was a free one from the auto parts store. Her hand rested on his, her nails perfectly manicured, a $50 gel polish shimmering. "This is it, Andre. This is the beginning of our empire," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He'd felt a surge of pride. He, Andre, the mechanic, was building an empire for his beautiful, ambitious wife. The sacrifices were all on his end, but he told himself it was temporary. He sold his beloved 1998 Ford F-150, a truck he'd babied for a decade, for $7,500 to help cover the unexpected costs of the plumbing installation at the bakery. He started driving his father's old 2012 Toyota Camry, a car with 187,000 miles on it and a persistent rattle in the dashboard. He packed his own lunch every day, sandwiches and a bag of chips, saving the $15 he might have spent at the diner near the yard. That was $75 a week, $300 a month, $3,600 a year that could go toward a new mixer or a point-of-sale system for the bakery. Simone's sacrifices were harder to see. She quit her job as a marketing assistant, where she made $48,000 a year, to focus on the bakery full-time, but her lifestyle didn't change. If anything, it became more expensive. She needed a new wardrobe for her role as a Carytown business owner. There was a $2,400 Burberry dress for the Chamber of Commerce meet and greet, an $800 pair of Stuart Weitzman boots for a magazine interview, a $900 Tory Burch handbag because image is everything, Andre. He never questioned it. He just picked up another overtime shift, the diesel fumes clinging to his clothes as he worked late into the night, fixing the engines that kept the city running. He was the silent, greasy foundation upon which their beautiful, sugary life was built. He had no idea how weak that foundation truly was. The cruelty didn't start with the "get out of my shop" comment. That was just the moment the mask came off completely. The escalating betrayal had been a slow poison, administered in small daily doses that he had tried his best to ignore. It was in the casual condescension, the dismissive laughs, the subtle ways they reminded him that he was from a different world. It began with the name. He had naively suggested they call it A and S Suites, or something that reflected their partnership. Loretta had laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. They were sitting in her immaculate living room in her Windsor Farms home, a house worth at least $1.2 million. Oh, Andre, that's sweet. But it doesn't have the right pedigree. Loretta's sweet mornings sounds established. It sounds like old money. Simone had nodded in agreement, her eyes fixed on her mother with rapt admiration. Mama's right, babe. It's about branding. He had dropped it. He was a mechanic. What did he know about branding? Then came the photo shoot. A local Richmond lifestyle magazine was doing a feature on new businesses. It was a huge opportunity. Andre took the day off work, forfeiting $256 in wages, and bought a new shirt, a crisp button-down from Banana Republic that cost $89. He felt proud, standing in the finished bakery, the smell of fresh paint and possibility in the air. The photographer, a wiry man with glasses, was setting up his lights. Loretta and Simone arrived together, looking like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Loretta was in an $8,700 Armani suit, and Simone wore a silk blouse that probably cost more than his entire outfit. They greeted the magazine editor and the photographer with bright, charming smiles. Andre stood off to the side, waiting to be called over. Loretta did a final check of her makeup in a small, compact mirror. She glanced over at Andre, and her smile faltered. She walked over to him, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "Andre, darling," she began, her voice a syrupy whisper. "We're so glad you're here to see this, but I think for the actual photos, it's best if it's just me and Simone. You know, the faces of the brand. I'm the majority owner," he said, his voice quiet. "And we are so grateful for your investment," she said, patting his arm. It was a gesture one might use on a child or a pet. But this is about marketing. It's the mother-daughter story. It's clean. It's relatable to our target demographic. A man in the picture? It just complicates the narrative. He looked at Simone for support, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. She was busy talking to the editor, laughing at something he'd said. She was already living in the world the magazine was selling, a world where he didn't fit. He felt a profound and chilling humiliation. He mumbled something about needing to get back to the shop and left before they could even notice he was gone. He saw the article a month later. The photo was beautiful. Simone and Loretta, their radiant, glowing skin looking perfect under the studio lights, stood arm in arm, presented as the sole creators of this family dream. His name wasn't mentioned once. The most painful moment, the one that replayed in his mind for months, happened 3 weeks before Loretta kicked him out of the shop. His father had been sick. His kidneys were failing. A slow, grueling decline. Andre spent most of his weekends at the hospital, sitting by his father's bed, reading to him, or just holding his hand. One Sunday, he was particularly exhausted. His father had had a bad night. Andre had been at the hospital since 6 a.m. He called Simone around noon. "Hey, honey, I'm really drained. Dad's not doing great. I don't think I'll be home until late." Her sigh was audible over the phone. "Andre, you can't spend every waking moment there. You have a life. We have a life." "He's my father, Simone." "I know, but Mama and I are getting swamped at the bakery. The brunch rush is insane. We could really use an extra pair of hands, even just to run boxes to the front or wash some pans." He was stunned into silence. He was sitting in a cold, sterile hospital room, watching his father's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, the beep of the heart monitor a constant grim metronome. And she was asking him to wash pans. "I can't, Simone. I need to be here." "Fine," she said, her voice clipped and cold. "But don't be surprised if we hire someone. We can't rely on you. It's just, you seem so disconnected from what we're trying to build. This bakery is our future, and you're always somewhere else, covered in grease or sitting in that dreary hospital." The line went dead. He stared at his phone, a cheap $200 Samsung that was 2 generations old. He looked at his hands, which had paid for her $1,100 iPhone. He looked at his father, the man who had taught him how to be reliable, how to work hard, how to provide. The cruelty of her words settled in his bones, a deep, unshakable cold. She didn't see his sacrifice or his grief. She only saw an asset that wasn't performing to her expectations. He had no idea that on that very day, as he sat by his dying father's bed, she was performing the ultimate act of betrayal, signing his name, his future, and his trust away with the flick of her wrist. The poison had done its work. The foundation was about to crumble. The discovery happened on a Saturday morning, at 9:32 a.m., 6 weeks after Loretta had ordered him out of the shop. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, one of those perfect Virginia autumn days. Andre hadn't spoken to Simone about what happened. A cold, silent war had descended upon their condo. They moved around each other like ghosts, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. He knew the marriage was over, but he was still trying to figure out how to untangle his life from hers, how to salvage the $120,000 that represented his mother's legacy. He was driving his old Toyota Camry down Carey Street, heading to an auto parts store to pick up a specific fuel injector for a Kenworth T680 he was working on. It was a part that would cost him $450, but the job would pay him $1,200. He rarely drove through Carytown. It was her territory, a world of boutique shops and expensive brunch spots that made him feel like he was wearing the wrong clothes. But the GPS had rerouted him due to an accident on the expressway. As he approached the block where the bakery stood, he saw a crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Balloons, in the bakery's signature pale pink and gold, were tied to the lamp posts. He slowed the car, his heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. And then he saw it. Stretched across the front of the building was a massive vinyl banner. The text was in an elegant, looping script. It read, "Grand reopening under new sole ownership. Loretta and Simone Evans. Family owned since day one." The words didn't compute at first. Sole ownership. Family owned since day one. He was family. He was the owner. He pulled the car over to the curb, ignoring the honk from the driver behind him. He put the car in park and just stared. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a marketing mistake, a poorly worded banner. But the phrase sole ownership was a legal term. It was precise. It was a declaration. His hands started to tremble. He felt a wave of nausea roll through him. He fumbled for his phone and pulled up the Virginia State Corporation Commission website. His fingers felt thick and clumsy as he typed in Loretta's Sweet Mornings, LLC. He clicked on the business entity details. He scrolled down to the list of members. His breath caught in his throat. There were only 2 names listed: Loretta Evans, member; Simone Evans, member. His name, Andre Jackson, was gone. Beside his name, in the history log, it said, "Member resignation filed." The date of the filing was listed. It was a Sunday 7 weeks ago. He froze. That Sunday. He knew exactly where he had been on that Sunday. He closed his eyes and the image was immediate and searing. The pale green walls of the VCU Medical Center, the smell of antiseptic, the soft, rhythmic beep of the machines connected to his father. His father had passed away 2 days later. That Sunday, he had been by his side from 6:17 a.m. until 10:45 p.m. He had not left the hospital once. He certainly hadn't signed any legal documents resigning from the business he had poured his life into. The air in the small car felt thick, unbreathable. He looked back at the bakery. He saw Loretta and Simone standing outside, greeting people, accepting hugs and congratulations. They were beaming, bathed in the bright morning sunlight. Simone was wearing a white dress that probably cost $1,000. She looked radiant. She looked free. He saw her throw her head back and laugh, a joyous, uninhibited sound he hadn't heard in years. And in that moment, the full, crushing weight of the betrayal landed on him. It wasn't just an insult. It wasn't just a business dispute. They had waited until he was at his most vulnerable, distracted by grief and love for his dying father, and they had stolen his mother's legacy from him. They had forged his name and erased him. The quiet man, the greasy mechanic, was finally incandescently angry. He put the car in drive, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, and drove away. Not back to the diesel yard, but toward downtown, to the tall glass towers where the lawyers worked. They had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated him. What would you do if you discovered a betrayal so deep it stole your past and your future? The shock can be paralyzing, but sometimes it's the spark that lights a fire. We're about to see Andre shift from victim to strategist. Stay with us. For the next 3 weeks, Andre lived a double life. At home, in the Oakmont Drive condo, he was the quiet, withdrawn husband. He was playing dumb, a role that chafed against every honest fiber in his body. But he knew it was his only advantage. He needed to gather his evidence without tipping his hand. Each lie, each feigned moment of normalcy was a scene in a grim play he was forced to direct. The first scene took place the night of his discovery. He got home at 7:12 p.m. Simone was in the kitchen, humming along to a playlist on her Sonos speaker, a $200 device he'd bought her for Christmas. The condo smelled of roasted garlic and herbs. She was making his favorite, lemon herb chicken. It was a calculated act of pacification. "Hey, baby," she said, turning to him with a brilliant smile. "Tough day?" She walked over and kissed him, a brief, dry press of her lips against his. He had to fight every instinct to recoil. "The usual," he said, his voice a low monotone. "Big rig with a busted transmission. Long day." He needed to find the original LLC operating agreement. He was almost certain it was in the small home office they shared. "Well, I'm making your favorite," she said, turning back to the stove. "And I got some good news today. We had a fantastic Saturday. The reopening was a huge success." He leaned against the doorframe, forcing a look of mild interest. "Reopening? I didn't know you were having one." She visibly tensed for a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic in her eyes before she smoothed it over. "Oh, it was just a small thing. A refresh. New menu items, new branding. Mama's idea, you know how she is." A lie? Effortless. Later that evening, while she was in the shower, he went into the office. He went straight to the filing cabinet, a cheap $150 metal one from Staples. He pulled open the drawer labeled Bakery. Inside were folders for receipts, invoices, permits. He found the one labeled LLC formation. His hands shook as he opened it. The original operating agreement, signed by all three of them in blue ink, was gone. In its place was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the member resignation form he had seen online, with a crude forgery of his signature at the bottom. The date was clearly visible. The date his father was dying. He took a photo of it with his phone, his heart hammering in his chest. The second scene happened 2 days later. He needed to get his hands on the original document. He approached Simone while she was on the couch, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. "Hey, honey," he said, sitting on the edge of the $1,200 coffee table. "My accountant was asking me for some of our business paperwork for the taxes. He needs the original LLC agreement, the one we all signed at the start." Her head snapped up. "Why? He's never needed that before." Her voice was sharp, suspicious. "Something about a new IRS rule," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "He just needs to see the original signatures. I looked in the filing cabinet and couldn't find it." "Oh, it's probably at the shop," she said, a little too quickly. "I'll grab it for you tomorrow." "Great, thanks," he said, getting up to leave the room before she could see the cold fury in his eyes. She was lying, and they both knew it. She would never produce that document because the original would show his real signature, and the contrast with the forgery would be damning. But her lie was confirmation enough. She was hiding it. The final scene of his charade was the most difficult. He needed a key piece of evidence, and he had to get it from the one place that held the most painful memories. He drove to the VCU Medical Center. He walked through the automatic doors, the familiar, sterile smell flooding his senses. He went to the administration office. A kind-faced black woman with her hair in neat twists sat behind the desk. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Andre said, his voice thick. "My father, William Jackson, was a patient here. He passed away about 2 months ago." He gave her the dates. "I need a copy of the visitor sign-in log for his room for a specific date." He named the Sunday of the forgery. "It's for an insurance claim," he lied. She gave him a sympathetic look and typed into her computer. After a few minutes, she printed out a sheet of paper. "Here you go. I'm so sorry for your loss." He thanked her and walked out to his car. He sat there for a long time looking at the document. It was a simple bureaucratic log, but to him it was a sacred text. There, in the neat columns, was the proof. Andre Jackson, his own clear signature, time in 6:17 a.m., time out 10:45 p.m., an unbroken 16-and-a-half-hour vigil, an alibi written in grief and love. He carefully folded the paper and placed it in his glove compartment next to his father's old registration. The play was over. He had his evidence. Now it was time to plan the final act. The lawyer's office was on the 22nd floor of a glass tower downtown, a world away from the grease and grit of the diesel yard. The firm, Harrison & Cole, had come highly recommended. Andre had put down a $5,000 retainer, nearly a month's salary, without hesitation. His attorney, a sharp, impeccably dressed black man named Marcus Thorne, listened to the entire story without interruption. His office overlooked the James River, the water glinting in the afternoon sun. Andre sat opposite him at a massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than his car. He had laid out his evidence in a neat row. The photo of the forged resignation letter, the printout of the SCC filing showing his removal, and his final, most powerful piece of evidence, the hospital visitor log, time-stamped and official. Marcus, who billed at $1,200 an hour, picked up the hospital log, his manicured fingers tracing Andre's signature. "This is it," he said, his voice calm and confident. "This is the anchor. An emotional alibi is one thing. A time-stamped third-party institutional record is another. This is irrefutable." He leaned back in his $4,000 Herman Miller chair. "So we have a clear case of fraudulent conveyance and forgery. They have falsified a legal document to illegally remove you as the majority member of an LLC in which you invested." He paused, looking at the bank statements Andre had provided. $120,000 of capital. Andre nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders for the first time in weeks. "So what happens now?" We have a few paths, Marcus explained. We can sue them for damages, the return of your investment plus punitive damages. We can press criminal charges for the forgery, or we can do something faster and, in my opinion, more effective. We file a corrective certificate of organization with the State Corporation Commission, along with an affidavit from you and a certified copy of this hospital log. We state that the member resignation was filed fraudulently. The SCC will investigate, but with this evidence, they will likely reinstate you as the majority member immediately, pending a full review. So I'd be the owner again? Andre asked. You've always been the owner, Marcus corrected him gently. This just forces the state to recognize that fact again. Once the certificate is corrected, you can walk into that bakery and you are in control. You can liquidate the assets, you can fire the staff, you can close the doors. As the 60% owner, the business decisions are yours to make. The thought was dizzying. Power. He hadn't thought about power. He had only thought about justice. What about the money? Andre asked. The $120,000? That's phase 2, Marcus said, a predatory glint in his eye. Once you are reestablished as the controlling member, you have access to all the business's financial records. We will conduct a full audit. I suspect we'll find that your wife and mother-in-law have been paying themselves exorbitant salaries, using company funds for personal expenses. That's called piercing the corporate veil, and it will allow us to go after their personal assets to recoup your investment and any misappropriated funds. Andre sat in silence, processing the information. The plan was methodical, legal, and devastating. It wasn't a loud, angry confrontation. It was a quiet, systematic dismantling of their entire world, built on the foundation of their own lies. I want to do that, Andre said, his voice firm. The corrective certificate. When can we file? My paralegal is drafting the affidavit as we speak, Marcus said, gesturing to an inter-office phone. It will be filed electronically this afternoon. The state usually takes 48 to 72 business hours to process. By Friday, you should be officially reinstated. They won't even know what's happened until it's done. Andre stood up and shook Marcus's hand. The lawyer's grip was firm. One more piece of advice, Mr. Jackson, Marcus said, his expression serious. When you go back into that shop, do not engage in a screaming match. Do not get emotional. Just present the facts. Your power is in your calm. Let them be the ones to fall apart. Andre nodded. He walked out of the glass tower and into the sunlight, the official plan now in motion. He felt a grim satisfaction. The strike was coming. They had built their dream on a lie, and he was about to hand them the bill, printed on official state letterhead. The strike was set for Saturday at 10 a.m., their busiest hour. Andre woke up early that morning. The rain from the night before had washed the city clean, and the sun was just beginning to break through the clouds. Simone was already gone, having left a note on the counter. Big day at the shop. Don't wait up. Joe. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. Andre didn't wear his usual work clothes. He put on the $89 shirt he'd bought for the photo shoot he was excluded from. He wore a pair of dark gray slacks and his best shoes. He even put on the $89 Timex watch his father had given him for his 30th birthday. He looked in the mirror. He didn't see a grease monkey. He saw a man who had been pushed too far. In his leather briefcase, a $250 gift from Simone from a long-ago anniversary, were 2 documents. One was the original LLC operating agreement, which he'd finally found hidden in a box of old tax returns in their storage unit. The other was the freshly printed Certificate of Reinstatement from the Virginia State Corporation Commission, which had arrived via email from Marcus's office at 4:37 p.m. the day before. His name was back where it belonged, Andre Jackson, member, 60%. He drove to Carytown. He didn't feel nervous. He felt a profound, almost unnerving calm. He parked his Toyota a block away and walked toward the bakery. Just as he'd expected, a line of about 15 people snaked out the door. The smell of sugar and coffee hung in the air. Through the large plate glass window, he could see Loretta and Simone working in perfect harmony. Loretta was at the register, smiling graciously at customers. Simone was artfully arranging cupcakes on a tiered platter. They were queens in their castle, a castle he had paid for and they had tried to steal. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The little bell tinkled softly. A few people in line glanced at him, then turned back, unimpressed. He didn't get in line. He walked straight to the end of the counter, near the register. Loretta saw him first. Her customer service smile froze on her face. Her eyes darted around, a flicker of panic. "Andre," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "What are you doing here? I told you." "I'm not here as a customer, Loretta," he said, his voice even and low, but loud enough for the people closest to the counter to hear. Simone looked up from her cupcakes, her face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into anger. "Andre, you need to leave," Simone hissed, walking toward him. "You are not welcome here." "That's funny," Andre said, reaching into his briefcase. "Because according to the state of Virginia, I own 60% of this place." He slid the certificate of reinstatement across the white quartz countertop. Loretta's eyes widened as she read the document. Her perfectly made-up face went completely white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, gray pallor. She put a hand on the counter to steady herself. "What is this?" This is impossible." "It's very possible," Andre said calmly. He then pulled out the second document, the hospital visitor log. "This is a log from VCU Medical Center. It shows I was with my dying father for 16 and a half hours on the day you claimed I signed a resignation letter." He placed it next to the certificate. "That's called forgery, Simone. It's a Class 5 felony." Simone stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. The entire shop had gone quiet. The customers in line were all staring, their brunch plans forgotten. The soft indie pop playing over the speakers suddenly sounded loud and intrusive. You can't do this," Loretta finally stammered, her voice trembling. "We have a line of customers. This is our business." "No," Andre said, his voice hardening for the first time. He looked directly at her, letting the full force of his quiet fury land. "It is my business, and as the majority owner, my first business decision is this. We're closed. Effective immediately." A collective gasp went through the line of customers. "Tell them," Andre said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Tell your customers that Loretta's Sweet Mornings is closed." Loretta looked from Andre's unyielding face to the expectant faces of her patrons. The humiliation was a physical thing, rolling off her in waves. Her regal composure shattered, leaving a broken, desperate woman in its place. Her hands were shaking. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path through her expensive foundation. She turned to the line, her voice cracking. I'm sorry," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. We have to close." A murmur of confusion and frustration rippled through the crowd. People started to put their wallets away, turning to leave, whispering amongst themselves. Simone just stood there, frozen, staring at Andre as if seeing him for the first time. The empire they had built on his back, with his money on top of a vicious lie, had just crumbled to dust in less than 5 minutes. All it took was a piece of paper, a quiet man, and the undeniable weight of the truth. The aftermath was not a single explosion, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of their own actions. The downfall was as methodical as Andre's plan had been. First, There was the bakery itself. True to his word, Andre closed it. The day after the confrontation, he had the locks changed, a $250 expense. He hired a business liquidation company to sell off the assets. The gleaming $18,000 Blodgett oven sold for $9,500. The $7,000 quartz countertops were worthless, as they couldn't be removed without breaking. The custom light fixtures, the display cases, the refrigerators, all sold for pennies on the dollar. The total liquidation brought in $32,400, a fraction of what he had invested. He put the money into a separate account, untouched. Second, there was the legal fallout. Marcus Thorne, on Andre's behalf, sent a formal demand letter to Loretta and Simone. It detailed the fraud and the forgery and laid out the financial audit results. As Marcus had predicted, the books were a disaster. Simone had been paying herself a salary of $8,000 a month, nearly $100,000 a year, from a business that had yet to turn a profit. Loretta had been using the business debit card for personal expenses, $400 dinners at Le Maire, $1,200 shopping sprees at Nordstrom, even her $200 monthly membership at a luxury spa. The total of misappropriated funds came to $67,800 over 18 months. The demand was simple: repay the $67,800 in stolen funds plus the remaining $87,600 of Andre's initial investment for a total of $155,400, or face a civil lawsuit and a criminal referral to the Commonwealth's attorney for the felony forgery. Third came the financial ruin for Loretta. She had co-signed the $4,500 a month lease for the Carytown storefront. With the business dissolved, she was personally liable for the remainder of the 5-year term. The landlord demanded a lease break fee of 6 months' rent, a sum of $27,000. To pay that, and to contribute to the settlement with Andre, Loretta had to take out a second mortgage on her Windsor Farms home, pulling out all of her available equity and putting her comfortable retirement in jeopardy. Her social standing, built on an image of effortless success, was shattered. The story of the public humiliation at the bakery spread like wildfire through the Richmond elite. Her phone stopped ringing. Fourth was the complete collapse of Simone's life. Without the bakery's fraudulent salary, she had no income. The beautiful life she had curated was a house of cards. She couldn't afford her half of their $2,800 mortgage. She couldn't afford the payments on her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car she had bought 6 months prior. Andre filed for divorce, citing fraud and adultery. He had discovered she was having an affair with the supplier who sold them their gourmet chocolate. Their condo, which was in both their names, had to be sold. After the mortgage was paid off, the small amount of equity was split. Simone walked away with just $14,000. She had to sell her BMW at a loss and move into a small one-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of town, one that cost $1,300 a month. Her Tory Burch handbags and Burberry dresses seemed ridiculous in her new, cramped life. Andre received a cashier's check from Loretta and Simone's lawyer for the full $155,400. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a reimbursement. The true cost, his trust, his years of sacrifice, his mother's legacy being tainted, could never be repaid. But as he looked at the check, he knew he finally had what he needed to build something for himself, on his own terms, with his own 2 hands. The consequences for them were not his creation. They were simply the harvest of the seeds they had sown. A year and a half later, the rain was coming down in sheets, drumming a steady rhythm on the metal roof of the new garage. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Andre was finishing up work on a Peterbilt's engine. The air smelled of rain, wet asphalt, and diesel. the smell he had once been taught to be ashamed of, but which he now recognized as the scent of his own success. The epilogue of his old life had been written. The divorce was finalized. Simone had sent him a long, rambling letter 6 months after the settlement, full of apologies and excuses. He read it once and threw it away. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about letting go of the weight for his own peace. He forgave her, but he would never forget. He wished her no ill will, but he had no space for her in his new life. His new life was taking shape right here, in this space that was once the source of his humiliation. After closing the bakery, he was still on the hook for the lease. But instead of breaking it, he'd had an idea. He'd gone to the landlord with a proposal. He would personally guarantee the lease for the next 10 years if he was allowed to convert the paved rear parking lot and the back half of the building into a commercial garage. The front half, the old storefront, he would sublease. The landlord, eager for a reliable long-term tenant, readily agreed. So in a turn of beautiful, quiet irony, Jackson Diesel Repair was born in the back of what used to be Loretta's Sweet Mornings. The large paved lot that was once reserved for patrons seeking overpriced croissants was now the perfect spot for an overnight diesel bay. He had invested the settlement money into his own business, buying a state-of-the-art diagnostic machine for $25,000 and 2 heavy-duty truck lifts for $15,000 each. He was his own boss. His clients were long-haul truckers, local delivery companies, the hard-working people who kept the country moving. They didn't care about the grease under his nails. They cared that he was honest, fair, and the best damn diesel mechanic in Richmond. His income had tripled. He was on track to make over $200,000 his first year. And the storefront? He had leased it back to Loretta, not out of pity, but as a final, quiet act of justice. She was no longer the owner. She was his tenant. She had to start a new, much humbler bakery, this time with her own money and a mountain of debt. Every month she wrote a rent check for $4,500, payable to him. Sometimes when he was working late in his bay, he could smell the faint scent of sugar mixing with the smell of diesel, a strange reminder of how intertwined their lives had become, and how he had finally, decisively, taken control. He wiped his hands on a rag, the gesture familiar and comforting. He looked around his garage. It wasn't chic or fancy. It was real. It was built on truth and hard work. He had learned a hard lesson. True wealth isn't about quartz countertops or designer clothes. It's not about the image you project. True wealth is about character. It's about building something honest and having the strength to stand up for yourself, not with a shout, but with the quiet finality of a signed certificate. It's about knowing that the same hands that can be dismissed as dirty are the very hands that can build a new life from the ashes of betrayal. The real value in a person isn't in the clean, polished facade they show the world, but in the strength and integrity of the foundation underneath. Sometimes you have to let the old structure crumble to build something stronger and more true in its place. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Andre. If his story of quiet strength and earned justice resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding true self-worth.